Today, we're jumping right into a real behavioral mystery surrounding a massive, seismic shift that's currently shaking up the modern workforce. We're going to draw on some truly fascinating research that analyzes workplace management and the profound, deeply human impact of recent global disruptions. Basically, we're going to figure out why people are leaving their jobs in absolute droves, what happens to the folks who are left behind, and how organizations can actually rebuild a thriving culture from the ground up.
Let's kick things off with a pretty staggering number, 40%. Hooking right into the stakes of what we're talking about today, 40% of U.S. employees have either been actively searching for new jobs or they plan to start looking very soon. Just think about that for a second. Nearly half of the entire workforce is eyeing the exit. We are literally witnessing an era where the fundamental psychological contract between employer and employee hasn't just shifted a little bit, it's been completely rewritten.
So let's get into Section 1, the Great Resignation Explained. Now, you might be wondering, who exactly is leading this massive exodus of workers? Well, the research reveals that this trend is heavily driven by younger professionals. We're talking Generation Z and Millennials, along with minority groups. These demographics are looking for something fundamentally different from your traditional 9-to-5. And when we break down exactly why they're leaving, a very clear pattern emerges. People want flexibility, career development, better pay, and a real work-life balance. But there is a totally crucial human element here, too. The research notes that about 56% of employees thought about finding a new job specifically because of their immediate managers. So the big takeaway here, poor immediate management, combined with that shifting psychological contract we talked about, is a massive driving force pushing talent out the door. People are just no longer willing to stick around in an unsupportive environment. 94%. I mean, look at the sheer magnitude of that number. This brilliantly illustrates the absolute retention power of internal investment. The source material highlights companies that are actually getting this right. Take Hilton, for example. They noticed an education gap among their team members, so they partnered up with an educational council and created a fully paid GD and high school diploma program. They even launched this Passport to Success program, training over 8,200 workers across 14 different countries. The lesson here is simple. When you invest in your people's futures, they're going to invest their future right back into you. This leads us right into Section 2, the true cost of layoffs. Now, to really understand how fragile the workforce is right now, we need to pull back the curtain and look at the deep, lingering trauma caused by pandemic-era layoffs. When revenues dried up practically overnight, so many organizations executed massive reductions in force. And the way those were handled, well, it left lasting scars that are absolutely still affecting recruitment today. We really have to slow down here and recognize this profoundly devastating five-fold human toll. Losing a job isn't just a loss of income. It's a full-on attack on a person's entire well-being. Mentally, stress-related illnesses run 50% higher in downsize companies. Physically, that stress shows up as extreme fatigue and totally wrecked sleep patterns. Socially, it strains family ties and ruins friendships. Financially, it plunges families into unwanted debt. And emotionally, it triggers deep loneliness and a complete loss of self-worth. So an improperly handled layoff isn't just some business metric, it is a full-blown human crisis. All right, Section 3, navigating compassion fatigue. Because here's the thing, that immense strain we just went over, it doesn't only affect the people who lose their jobs. It deeply, deeply impacts the workers who are left behind to pick up the pieces. These survivors of layoffs often deal with intense guilt, massive stress, and a super heavy emotional burden. And that brings us to a really critical concept, compassion fatigue. It's defined as emotional and physical exhaustion that actually leads to a diminished ability to empathize. At first, we mostly saw this in overworked healthcare professionals dealing with overflowing hospitals. But now, this burnout is spilling rapidly into everyday workplaces. It's become such a huge issue that companies are having to take unprecedented steps. For instance, the research points out that United Airlines actually had to mandate compassion training for around 30,000 of its employees just to help them navigate the heightened tensions and unruly behaviors they were dealing with every single day. Which brings us to Section 4, rebuilding workplace trust. So we've identified the trauma, we know the compassion fatigue is real, and now we can pivot to some actual, actionable solutions for HR and leadership to repair this damage. As the core research highlights, the mandatory closures and those massive subsequent shifts fundamentally changed life for millions of people. To move forward, managers absolutely have to adjust their practices to equitably and ethically handle workforce changes. If a company handled a crisis poorly in the past, trust me, they are the ones suffering the most right now trying to attract new talent. The market remembers. If the worst happens and a crisis actually forces a company to make cuts, following these 5 concrete layoff strategies by Veralis is absolutely essential. 1. Have a well-thought-out plan to avoid legal and operational chaos. 2. Remain totally objective. You have to base decisions on actual business need, not personal bias. 3. Always treat departing employees with respect and dignity. 4. Communicate clearly and honestly to shut down the rumor mill before it starts. And 5, which is a step people so often forget, re-recruit your remaining staff. You have to remind the people still sitting there why their roles matter to the future of the organization.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the power of hope.
To really grasp how to rebuild a resilient, long-lasting workforce after so much turmoil, we have to look at a fascinating laboratory study from the 1950s by Dr. Kurt Richter. It involved rats, and this is where the psychology of retention gets incredibly interesting. On one hand, when placed in water with zero intervention, the rats got physically and mentally exhausted, gave up, and sank after an average of just 15 minutes. But then, look at the difference in the second round. Researchers plucked the rats out right before they sank, dried them off, let them rest for a bit, and then put them back in. Because those rats now believed they would eventually be rescued, because they literally had hope, they swam and treaded water for an astonishing average of 60 hours. The simple introduction of hope allowed them to endure exponentially longer.
So what's the big takeaway here for us? Well, if the mere possibility of rescue can push an exhausted animal to keep moving for 60 hours instead of 15 minutes, just imagine what a strong belief in a brighter future can do for your employees. HR professionals, managers, and leaders absolutely must be the conveyors of hope. Sure, competitive pay and nice sign-on bonuses are necessary to get people in the door. You need that, but those are just temporary motivators. A leader's ability to inspire hope and provide a clear developmental future, that is the ultimate sustainable retention tool.
Which brings us to our final thought today. Take a hard look at your own environment and ask yourself, does your workplace merely foster survival, forcing people to just tread water until they exhaust themselves and quit? Or does it actively inspire hope, building a culture where people truly want to stay, develop, and thrive? Leave with this thought and challenge yourself to be that conveyor of hope in your organization.